There is a version of you that people wanted to exist. Soft, reactive, easily moved, easily managed. They called it sensitivity. They called it depth. They called it a gift. And for a long time, you believed them because the framing was flattering, and flattery is one of the oldest traps ever set. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. You stopped bleeding on command. You stopped collapsing when the pressure was applied. You stopped performing the vulnerability that everyone around you had grown accustomed to harvesting. And that is when it started. The quiet withdrawal of warmth, the subtle increase in hostility, the accusations dressed up as concern. The people who once celebrated your sensitivity began to resent something they couldn't quite name. What they were reacting to was not a flaw, it was an upgrade. And upgrades, especially in people who were once easy to control, are rarely welcomed. Chapter 1. What an empath actually is, stripped of mythology. The word empath has been hollowed out by misuse. It has been turned into an identity badge, a spiritual designation, a way of saying, I feel more than you, without having to prove it. That is not what this is about. Forget the mythology. What you actually are in behavioral terms is someone with a nervous system that processes social and emotional information at a higher resolution than most. You notice what others miss. You feel the undercurrent of a conversation before the words confirm it. You absorb the emotional states of the people around you like an unshielded receiver. This is not magic. It is neurobiology, a heightened activation of mirror neuron systems, an acute sensitivity to micro-expressions, vocal tone, body language, and relational dynamics. The problem was never the sensitivity itself. The problem was that for most of your life, this capability had no container. You felt everything and you reacted to everything, which made you extraordinarily useful to people who understood, consciously or not, that a person who absorbs emotion and responds to it can be steered by emotion. Feed them guilt, they comply. Feed them fear, they retreat. Feed them warmth, they bond. You were not weak, you were undefended. That distinction matters enormously. Chapter 2. The architecture of empath exploitation. To understand why your unbreakability disturbs people, you first have to understand how your sensitivity was used against you. This is not comfortable territory. Most people prefer to think of exploitation as something dramatic, obvious manipulation, cartoonish villains. The reality is quieter and far more common. The people who most effectively used your emotional sensitivity against you were probably not sadists. They were simply people who found, through trial and error, that you responded to certain inputs in predictable ways. Guilt worked, neediness worked, rage followed by remorse worked, emotional chaos that required you to soothe it worked. And because you were built to feel and to respond to feeling, you obliged, not out of stupidity, out of instinct. Your system was designed to stabilize emotional environments. When someone around you destabilized, you moved toward them. You processed their pain as if it were your own. You worked to resolve it. This made you, in functional terms, an emotional shock absorber. And shock absorbers, by design, take the impact so that the rest of the machine does not have to. The machine rarely considers whether the shock absorber might have a limit. Chapter 3. The moment of fracture. And it states there is a specific moment. It does not always announce itself. When an empath reaches the end of what they can absorb without consequence, this is not a breakdown. It does not look like collapse. It looks from the outside like coldness, like indifference, like you suddenly stopped caring. But what actually happened is more precise than that. You ran a calculation, possibly unconsciously, and the result was that the cost of continued emotional exposure to a particular person or environment exceeded anything you could justify paying. The warmth did not disappear. It redirected inward, behind a wall that most people around you had never seen before and did not know how to interpret. This moment is the fracture point, not a fracture of you, but a fracture of the dynamic that others had built their behavior around. And here is what makes it dangerous to the people around you. They had no contingency for it. Their entire relational strategy with you was built on the assumption that you were permeable, that you would always eventually feel your way back into connection with them, that the warmth was unconditional and the access was permanent. When they discovered it was not, the response was not reflection, it was escalation. Chapter 4. Why emotional invulnerability reads as aggression. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human behavior. When a person who was previously emotionally available becomes unavailable, not hostile, not cruel, simply no longer accessible, the people around them often experience it as an attack, not metaphorically, neurologically, The withdrawal of expected emotional responsiveness activates the same threat detection pathways as direct aggression. Your silence is processed as a strike. Your stability is processed as contempt. Your refusal to be destabilized is processed as domination. And in a perverse way, it is, not because you intended it that way, but because in any relational system, the person who controls their own emotional state has structural power over those who do not. When you were reactive, everyone around you had a lever. They knew that if they pulled it hard enough, you would move. Your unbreakability removed the lever. And people who have relied on a lever, even people who did not know they were relying on it, feel its absence as a kind of violence. Chapter 5. The hatred that looks like concern. Pay attention to the form the backlash takes. It rarely arrives as open hostility. It comes dressed in the language of worry. They tell you that you have changed, and they say it the way someone says a person has become ill. They say, you seem cold now, as if coldness is a symptom of something that needs to be corrected. They say they miss who you used to be, which is an honest statement, but not in the way they intend it. What they miss is your permeability. They miss the version of you that could be moved by their moods, shaped by their needs, returned to warmth by their efforts. They are not concerned about you. They are concerned about their access to you. The disguise is nearly perfect because it uses the vocabulary of care, but care that is contingent on your emotional availability is not care. It is maintenance of a resource. When the resource becomes self-sustaining, the maintenance workers don't celebrate. They panic, and then they apply pressure through guilt, through narrative, through social repositioning to restore the original configuration. This is the hatred that dresses itself as love, and recognizing it without flinching is one of the hardest things you will ever do. Chapter 6. The shadow side of empathic power. Now we reach the part that most analyses of this topic refuse to enter. Your upgrade is not clean. It does not make you good. It makes you powerful, and power without examination produces the same distortions in an empath that it produces in anyone else. Because here is what you gain when you develop emotional invulnerability after a lifetime of oversensitivity. You gain the ability to read people with surgical precision while remaining personally unaffected by what you find. That is not a neutral capability. You know faster than almost anyone in a room what a person needs to hear to feel understood. You know what threatens them, what flatters them, what moves them. You developed this knowledge through decades of involuntary attunement, and now, for the first time, you can deploy it without being consumed by it. This is where the shadow lives. The empath who upgrades and does not examine their motivations can become something the people who feared them always suspected they were. Not a healer, not a nurturer, but a strategist with perfect emotional intelligence and no particular obligation to use it gently. This is not a warning to stop the upgrade. It is a warning to know what you are becoming. Power that is not examined does not disappear. It operates in the dark. Chapter 7. The role of perceived betrayal. One of the deepest sources of the hatred directed at your unbreakable nature is the feeling of betrayal. People who knew you in your permeable phase built a specific story about who you are. That story served them. In it, you were the one who felt deeply, who could be reached, who ultimately could not withstand emotional pressure without eventually softening. You were, in their internal model of the world, reliable in your vulnerability. When you invalidated that model, you did not just change your behavior, you retroactively rewrote the meaning of the relationship from their perspective. If you are no longer who they thought you were, then the entire history between you becomes unstable. The moments when you were soft and giving become ambiguous. Were you really that person, or were you always something else waiting? This is profoundly destabilizing, and people rarely respond to destabilization with curiosity. They respond with anger, with narrative construction, with the retroactive assignment of motives to your past behavior that make the story coherent again. You were always manipulative. You were always cold underneath. The warmth was a performance. None of this is necessarily true, but it is what the mind constructs when it needs to stabilize a story that the facts no longer support. Chapter 8. What unbreakable actually means. That is simply numbness, dissociation, dressed up as strength. The person who no longer feels has not upgraded. They have shut down. The distinction is critical, and it is something you need to examine without mercy when you look at your own state. True unbreakability is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of something stronger than feeling. A structural relationship with your own emotional experience that allows you to feel fully without being commanded by what you feel. You can be moved without being controlled. You can register pain without it becoming policy. You can feel someone's suffering without being obligated to resolve it at cost to yourself. This is not coldness, it is precision. The empath who is genuinely upgraded is not someone who stopped caring. They are someone who stopped allowing caring to be used as a mechanism of extraction. The warmth still exists. The difference is that it now flows where it is warranted, not where it is demanded. And that distinction between warranted warmth and demanded warmth is something the people around you may never accept, because they're not interested in warranted warmth. They want the unfiltered, unconditioned kind, the kind that flows regardless of how they behave, and you have stopped providing it, which means by their metrics you have become unacceptable. Chapter 9. The social repositioning that follows. Previously permeable person becomes unbreakable. The social group around them rarely responds with neutrality. What follows is a repositioning campaign, usually informal, often unconscious, but structurally consistent. The goal is to re-establish the old hierarchy by changing the social narrative around you. You will be described as having become arrogant, as having lost your empathy, which is ironic, but the irony is lost on the people deploying the accusation. You will be framed as someone who thinks they are better than everyone now, which is a translation of the real observation. You no longer respond to the same social pressures that keep everyone else in place. You may be excluded from spaces where your changed nature would be disruptive. You may find that people who were once warm toward you have cooled, that information stops flowing to you, that you are gently pushed to the perimeter of social systems that once positioned you at the center. It is not random. It is a coherent social immune response. You have become, in the language of systems, disruptive to the existing equilibrium, and systems, social, organizational, familial, always attempt to either absorb or expel elements that disrupt their equilibrium. If you cannot be re-regulated, you will be removed. Chapter 10. The ones who stay. Not everyone leaves. Not everyone repositions. There is a small category of people who respond to your upgrade, not with hostility, but with a recalibration, a shift in how they relate to you that reflects a genuine change in their understanding of who you are. These people are worth understanding because they represent the rarest response to another person's growth, adaptive recognition. They were not, as it turns out, relating to your permeability. They were relating to something else, some quality of attention, of perception, of presence that persisted through the change. And because they were relating to that, they did not lose you when you stopped being manageable. They found you. These people are not necessarily more virtuous. They are more secure. A person who does not require your emotional availability to feel safe around you does not feel threatened when that availability becomes conditional. They have their own internal stability, which means your stability does not threaten theirs. The people who stay after the upgrade are often the people worth keeping, not because they passed a test, but because the upgrade revealed, without drama, who was actually there. Now, to feel me, my name's Sin. The danger of mistaking. Upgrade for arrival. This is the final trap, and it is subtle. You go through the process, the overexposure, the fracture, the retreat, the reconstruction. You develop the capacity to feel without being commandeered by feeling. You stop being harvestable, and then, very quietly, you begin to believe that you have arrived somewhere final, that the work is complete, that because you can no longer be broken in the old ways, you cannot be broken at all. This is a mistake. The upgrade is real, but it is not a destination. It is a new baseline from which new vulnerabilities will eventually emerge, because that is the nature of any system that remains in contact with other systems. The person who believes they have become truly unbreakable has simply not yet encountered the right kind of pressure. New connections create new exposure. New dependencies create new leverage points. What you have built is not an impenetrable structure. It is a better calibrated one. The task is not to finish the process. The task is to remain honest about where you are in it, which requires the same quality of attention you use to direct outward, turn fully inward, permanently, without comfort, without conclusion. Closing. The cold fact. They hate your unbreakable nature because it reveals something they cannot reconcile. A person who once absorbed everything and now absorbs nothing on demand represents a possibility that destabilizes their entire model of how people work. If you could change, if someone is feeling as attuned, as deeply affected by everything as you clearly once were could develop this, then the softness they rely on in others is not fixed. The access they count on is not guaranteed. The levers they have spent years identifying and calibrating in the people around them could at any moment stop working. You are not just an individual who changed. You are evidence that the change is possible. And evidence, when it contradicts a worldview that people have organized their lives around, is not welcomed. It is attacked. So they will call it coldness. They will call it damage, they will call it loss, and you will watch them do it with the precise, unhurried attention of someone who finally understands what they're looking at. That is not cruelty, that is clarity, and clarity in the end is the only thing worth building toward.